The gods of paganism? That's right. Today we're going to be discussing with Dr. Christopher McIntosh his book, The Call of the Old Gods. We're going to explore the mysteries of spirituality, history, and the unseen by diving into the world of paganism with scholar and author Dr. Christopher McIntosh. In his latest work, McIntosh uncovers the rise of modern paganism, explores practices like Stav, sacred gardening, and breathwork, and shares rare encounters with some of the most influential figures in the esoteric world. Together we will discuss how reconnecting with nature and the land beneath our feet can awaken the magic within. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, with Truth Be Told. Please welcome back to the Truth Be Told studios, the one and only Dr. Christopher McIntosh. All right, we have back with us Christopher McIntosh, Dr. Christopher McIntosh. We're going to be talking about his book, The Call of the Old Gods, My Occult Journey on the Pagan Path. Well, I'm excited to have you back. It's been a while. I hope you're doing well.
Yes, doing fine, thanks.
Awesome. Well, last time we had a great discussion, but this time I know it's going to be even better. In this book, particularly this book, you described this book as part memoir, and also a part meditation. Can you share like the moment, because that's kind of important, the moment in your journey that shifted your perspective towards paganism? Because paganism can get kind of a negative feedback from many people. They get scared of that word.
Well, it was actually a gradual process because quite early in my life, well, say around my early 20s, I became interested in esotericism and occultism, but more from the point of view of a scholar than a participant. And so I began writing books on these things, a book on astrology, and then a book on the Rosicrucian movement, and various other books in a similar vein. For some years I was living in London, in a part of London where there were a lot of people who were involved in occult activities. There was one particular group that was practicing a kind of ritual magic in the Golden Dawn tradition. And I became friendly with these people and started to take part in their rituals. So I became more and more of a participant. And there were two people I got to know around that time. One was a woman who she's now called Freya Eswin, and she at one point became interested in the runes, and through the runes she got drawn into the whole Nordic tradition, and that became her personal path. And another person I got to know around the same time was Hilmar Ørn Hilmarsson, who is now head of the pagan community in Iceland, the Asatru community. And I became very friendly with him. And so I got more and more interested in this Nordic pagan tradition. But I still wasn't. I still didn't feel it was my personal path.
Right.
And I was still really looking for a personal path. I was sort of experimenting with the Golden Dawn type of magic and other things. Well, then to cut a long story short, I emigrated to the United States. I was at that time married to an American woman and moved with her to New York. And she was of partly, well, mainly Jewish extraction. And right next door to our house in New York was a synagogue. And I started to attend this synagogue, and just out of interest, really. And I found it very attractive. And then she was drawn into it as well, having not had not really had any feeling for Judaism up till then. She got drawn in as well, and so we were both attending this synagogue. Then one evening, we attended a lecture that was given by the rabbi, and he was talking about the difference between monotheism and polytheism. And he said, well, you know what the difference is? It is that in monotheism, everything moves in a straight line. The whole of history moves in a straight line towards the promised land, the last judgment, the second coming, or whatever.
Right.
Whereas in paganism, in the polytheistic religions, everything goes in a great circle. And in that moment, I thought, well, I'm a man of the circle, not the straight line. So that was one revelation. The other was that looking back at Europe from the vantage point of New York, I realized that basically I'm a North European, and the ancient gods of North Europe are my gods. So I think those were the moments when I really began to think of myself as a pagan. Well, then my marriage fell apart. The job I had in New York came to an end, so I moved back to London, and very quickly I found a job in Hamburg with an institute of UNESCO. So I moved to Hamburg, and then one day I was attending the Frankfurt Book Fair on behalf of my institute, and I happened to run across an old friend from London days, Frederick Lamond, who was a very interesting person. He had, as a young man, he had joined the Wicca movement. When the founder of the movement, Gerald Gardner, was still alive. He'd become a member of Gerald Gardner's coven, and had as soon as he was initiated into this coven, he felt that he'd found his true spiritual home.
Wow.
And he remained in the Wicca movement for the rest of his life. And he had written a book about his spiritual path called Religion Without Beliefs, which was partly about paganism in general, partly about his own path to paganism. And he was looking for a publisher for this book. Well, he didn't find a publisher immediately, but he had it published a year or two later, and I read it. And I read it on a train, and when I finished reading it, I was convinced that the pagan path was the path for me. So when I got back to Hamburg, I called him on the phone and said, well, what can I do? And he said, well, you could do two things. You could join the Pagan Federation, which was an international organization, had a branch in Germany. And you could start what's called in Germany a Stammtisch. That's a regular meeting in a pub where kindred spirits get together and talk about their particular interest and have a convivial evening. so I did that. He put me in touch with various pagans in the Hamburg and North German area, and so I started up a pub moot in Hamburg, and it was the members were from various different traditions. There were some who were into the sort of vaguely Celtic form of paganism. There were others who were into the Nordic tradition. And I started to celebrate with them. And I got more and more interested in the Nordic tradition. So eventually that was the tradition that I went for. And then then through pagan interests, I met my wife, Donata, and I moved, who was also, well, she was very unusual. As I explain in the book, she was a scholar of religion, but also herself a practitioner of her particular form of, in effect, a form of goddess religion. And so we got married, and I moved to Bremen, where she lived. And then I came into contact with people in the Bremen area who were into the Nordic tradition, and I began to celebrate with them. And I had one particular friend, Jörg Rohfeldt, who led a group in this tradition, Azatru, as it's called, and he had a piece of land in the country where he'd created a wonderful ritual place with a sacred grove of birch trees and a fireplace in the middle, and so that's where we used to celebrate. Then 2 or 3 years ago, he very suddenly and unexpectedly died. Yeah, so
can I ask you a real quick question? Just
with his death, the group rather sort of became inactive. So then since then I've really concentrated more on my own practice, my own private practice at home, and
nice.
Also celebrating with my wife,
nice.
with her form of practice. So that's really where I am now.
That's wonderful, and it's a good journey to explain to people. So as they're going on their own journey or thinking about it, it's nice to hear somebody that's been experienced in it for quite a while. I do want to talk because you mentioned Wiccan, and then paganism. So just to clarify, Wiccan is more of a modern day paganism, is that right? And paganism is more older traditions. I want to clarify for people that may not.
I would say Wicca is really a form of paganism.
Yeah.
But as you say, it's a fairly recent creation. It was created by Gerald Gardner, who was basically a former colonial civil servant, and I think at one point he'd been a rubber planter in Malaya. Then he founded Wicca. I think it was must have been around the 1940s or thereabouts, and he in a way he was a genius, because he had been a Freemason, and I think he'd been involved in various forms of ritual magic, and he wanted to found an order, and he started reading about the history of witchcraft, and he came to the conclusion that witchcraft was an actual religion. It was a form of pagan worship. And so he decided, well, I'm going to revive this, or rather, I'm going to create an organization that will be a continuation of this witchcraft pagan tradition. But in fact, what he created was a mixture of elements of Freemasonry, like having 3 degrees of initiation, and elements of Golden Dawn magic, elements of what he picked up from reading accounts of folk witchcraft.
Wow!
And so it was really a creation, but it was a brilliant creation in its way, because it had basically just 2 deities. It had the goddess, the great goddess of the moon, and the horned god of the sun, and these were the 2 deities that they worked with. So there was a kind of polarity there, and the emphasis was really on the goddess, and the high priestess in the coven was really the central figure. It chimed in very well with the feminist movement, which was
right.
It came a little bit later, but when the feminist movement came, it chimed in very well with Gardner's Wicca. So you could say that it is a form of paganism.
So it's taken bits and pieces from a few different things. It sounds like Freemasonry, but, Nowadays,
paganism is the kind of overall term. For movements that are basically polytheistic. Well, one can make a distinction between paganism and neo-paganism. And the Nordic path is part of paganism or neo-paganism.
Nice. And I know I saw in the book about and this is not news to anybody, but most people, spirituality or even religion, Christianity, spiritual seekers are looking to transcend. But you emphasize re-enchantment and grounding in the land. Why do you think reconnecting with the earth is vital for your spiritual fulfillment? And how has that changed, or is that something that just people aren't aware of to do?
Well, one of the problems in the modern world is that so many people are cut off from the land. They're not rooted in a particular place. They have no sense of roots. This is something that we need as human beings. Either a place where we were born and grew up, or a place where we have found that we can put down roots. And the land where we have these roots is it's not just the land itself; it's everything that goes with it. Mm-hmm. It's the nature, the wildlife, the traditions and customs of the community that live there, the language, the shared mythology, and all of that. So that's it in a nutshell. What I mean when I talk about roots and belonging to a particular place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. Yeah. I just think sometimes people say when they look forward only, they see the tunnel, but they miss all the other things around them. So I think, like you said, nowadays, because it's harder for people to afford homes or harder to get settled, and where many of our ancestors, once they lived in a home until they died, and then passed it on to their children. Now we're moving to new jobs and just all kinds of different things. It is hard to be rooted and to build keep the traditions in the home. So yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, one of the when people ask me what draws me to paganism, I say that I think a spiritual path should satisfy basically the various different levels of the human being. And originally, I thought in terms of 4 levels, namely the soul, the brain, the heart, and the belly. But by the belly, I mean the visceral Dionysian part of ourselves. So Christianity has a lot for the soul. It has a lot for the heart. Not so much for the brain, and nothing for the belly. But then I realized that there's a 5th element, which is the feet. But by the feet, I mean rather the ground on which they stand.
Right.
Which is what I was just talking about. So, for me, the pagan religion satisfies all these levels. It's the most, for me, the most complete spiritual path.
Yeah. I'm starting to try to do that more myself. Is getting out in nature more. The old saying is taking the shoes off, walking in the grass, just to be more grounded, just to feel the earth. And who knew that's part of paganism? It just feels good. Also, in your book, you explore the unique practices of. I'm going to say, is it Stav?
Oh yes, Stav. Yes.
Can you talk about that? Because again, a lot of people don't have the ability, like to have a garden, to take time to do breath work. Can you describe Stav and how? And I think it doesn't mean autumn season. Is that what it means?
It doesn't mean what?
Does it mean the Stav? Does it mean autumn season? Is that what it means?
To be quite honest, I'm not quite sure what the word means.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw that somewhere, but
it's a system that was developed by a Norwegian, Ivar Hafskjeld, and he claims that it was a tradition in his family that had been in his family for generations, and that he had learned it basically from his grandfather. Well, he was very interested in martial arts, and he went off to Japan for a number of years and learned some of the Japanese martial arts systems. And he realized that they had a lot in common with this Stav tradition. But the tradition that he had learnt about from his grandfather was sort of incomplete. And so what he did was he combined what he'd learned in Japan from what he'd learned from his grandfather and developed it into this system called Stav. So it's partly a kind of reconstruction with ancient roots, and it's partly a martial arts system, and it's partly a kind of, you could say, a kind of runic yoga. So I've done I've practiced both of those aspects of Stav, but now I just use it as a personal, yes, as I say, a kind of yoga.
It reminds me of what Stav, like Krav Maga, the Brazilian, martial arts or whatever I don't know if it's considered martial arts, but yeah.
Yeah. It involves a series of body positions corresponding to the runes. That's sort of the core of it.
That's pretty cool. Well, I do want to talk also because with stuff, the sacred gardening, because I grew up with pretty much except for me. I don't garden, but my father did, my grandparents did, my great-grandparents did. They all gardened, and it wasn't just a small little flower garden. It was a huge, growing your own corn and watermelon, pretty much everything. What is sacred gardening? What does that mean? And can you talk about how do you, see the act of tending to the land as a form of, spiritual practice? What is it, first of all?
Well, I was really turned on to sacred gardening by a Scottish poet and artist called Ian Hamilton Finlay, whom I first met around the early 1970s, and he was actually quite famous. Initially he became famous as a concrete poet. He was very much in the avant-garde movement of avant-garde poetry at that time, and then he moved to a place in the country near Edinburgh, where he and his then wife created a wonderful garden, and it was a kind of mixture of gardening and poetry and art, but it had a spiritual component, because he was what he was trying to do really was to revive in a way, bring to life again the classical gods. So he dedicated the whole garden to Apollo, and he had one outbuilding which he turned into an Apollo temple, and he had other references to the classical gods in the garden. And I was just bowled over by this garden, because it made me realize what you could do with a garden, that a garden could be more than just a place with a lot of plants in it. It could be a kind of outdoor temple where you could go into the garden and you could have an experience on a different level. Yes, there you have.
That's beautiful.
An example of the Chinese moon gate.
Oh, you know what that was? Look at you.
Yeah. Well, this is an example of how important the entrance is in a garden, because the entrance is a threshold, really, between two worlds, between the everyday world and the enchanted world of the garden. So you need something marking the threshold, so that when you go over it, then you have a feeling of transition into this enchanted world. So one of the things that I've been doing is to create my own sort of mini sacred garden here where I live.
And When you said you created it, so what did you create it based off of, and what? I wish we had a picture of it just so we could see. But how did you want to create that for your rituals?
I call it a garden of the mysteries, and by that I mean the mysteries of ancient Greece and Rome, the classical mysteries, and the Hermetic mysteries, and the mysteries of the northern mysteries, the Celtic and Nordic mysteries of the north. As you go through the garden, you see various objects and works of art that evoke these mysteries. And so to give you an example, in one part of the garden, there's one part of the garden that has a little sort of grove of rhododendron trees. And in this grove, I've made a circle of flat stones inscribed with runes. So I can go into this circle, and it acts as a kind of oracle, because the sun, especially when the sun and wind, because the sun filters through the leaves of the rhododendron bushes and falls on the runes. So the sunlight plays over the runes. Sometimes an insect will crawl over one or other of the stones. So I'm constantly getting a message from this.
Oh, that's cool.
From this
that's
runic
nice.
circle. And there are various inscriptions. So I can sit there, and opposite the circle is a kind of is a stone, sort of in the shape of it's kind of a triangular stone, about the size of a gravestone, and there are two ravens carved into it, and a text which says, it's in German, but basically it says this refers to two ravens in the Nordic tradition who are the ravens of Odin, and one is called Hugin, who is the raven of thought, and then there's Munin, which is the raven of memory. So the text says, Hugin, raven of thought, Munin, raven of memory, fly high and far, come safely back. So when you think about it, thought and memory are the two basic functions of the mind,
right?
Because one doesn't work without the other. So I can sit there and allow my thoughts and my memories to roam, but then come back again.
That's pretty cool. That's nice. That's very peaceful sounding.
yeah. And then I have two reliefs on the wall of a terrace. One is a head of Apollo. The other is a Maenad. The Maenad representing the Maenads were the followers of Dionysus. So that is a kind of polarity, because Apollo is the god of light and beauty and reason and all of that, whereas Dionysus is the god of passion and ecstasy and drunkenness and all of those things.
That sounds like a good time to me.
Yeah, but again, the two complement each other.
Yeah.
So these are some of the things that I have in the garden.
That's amazing. And one thing, I saw a picture when I was looking up that other picture of the garden. It reminds me of Stonehenge. So,
yes.
Could Stonehenge, does it sound like a pagan ritual place to me? Because if it goes off what this picture is, is there any evidence that paganism rituals were taking place there?
Oh, yes, definitely. Basically seasonal rituals.
Right.
Because the stones are placed in such a way that they align with certain positions of the sun. So at the summer solstice, the sun would rise at a particular point and shine through a gap in the circle, and so the ancient Britons would assemble at Stonehenge at that time and hold a ritual, or at the spring equinox.
Which actually, it's coming up, the spring equinox, and which
That's
I think
Yeah.
it's pretty fascinating because I was reading about the spring equinox. What's it called? Ostara.
Ostara, yes.
Ostara,
Yeah.
and it, from what it's talking about, time for renewal, rebirth, balance, and I found it fascinating. Egg decorating, planting seeds, starting a garden, which is true. Egg hunt for eggs, which, what does that sound like? Easter, which is funny that every Christianity religion, Christmas, which a lot of stuff are pagan based, and now I didn't know this was Easter, which is the rising of the third day rising of Christ from the dead, is also paganism when it comes to the traditions of that. I find that fascinating.
Yes.
Can you talk about what that is about Ostara? Because that's coming up in just a month.
Yeah. Well, yes, it's the egg is obviously a symbol of fertility. So it's the time when the earth becomes fertile again. It's interesting how many of these basically pagan traditions have survived in the form of customs. Yeah, I mean, yes, that's a nice picture.
Yeah, it is. That's pretty. Well, yeah, I just find it fascinating that a lot of traditional religious Christianity-based holidays have so much paganism added to it, and most people they just don't know it. But
well, I mean, when you think of the Christmas tree, for example,
yeah, which was
which goes right back to basically it's a tradition that came out of Germany.
And that was based on
where
paganism.
The trees are regarded as sacred. Trees have always been regarded as sacred in this part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's very grounding. You hear the old saying, "Hug a tree." I mean, it's, it may seem weird. I don't do it often. Sometimes I'll do it once in a while. If I see a real beautiful tree, I'm like, oh, I'll give it a hug. It's not going to hurt, but it is a living being. I mean, it does have, it needs oxygen, it needs water, just like us, and it's a living thing, and just like us, it ends up dying. So, except unless you're like one of these old redwoods that lived 1,000 years. Well, the name of your book, The Call of the Old Gods, I'm curious, why did you call it that? And because you mentioned a couple of old pagan gods, Apollo, Demeter. I mean, there's
Dionysus.
Yeah. Can you talk about the title and what that meaning is?
Yeah, well, yes. Where shall I begin?
So, for me, the old pagan gods, I mean, there's many. It looks like there's quite a few of them. So it reminds me of the Greek gods, where there were quite a few of them. is there one, like Zeus was the main of the Greek gods? Is there a main god of the pagan gods?
Well, that varies from one pagan tradition to another.
Interesting.
But well, to try to answer your question, there's an American psychologist, or the late James Hillman. He was quite a well-known psychologist and writer on psychology. He'd studied under Carl Gustav Jung in Switzerland and become a sort of Jungian. But then he went his own way and developed his own psychology that differed in some ways from Jungian psychology. And he wrote a very interesting book called Re-envisioning Psychology, and in which he basically sets out a pagan point of view, because he says that the pagan worldview is really much more. It's a much more realistic way of looking at human beings than the monotheistic worldview, because after all, each human being is many people under one roof, and a pagan paganism really allows for one to express these different parts of oneself. So for me, the gods are, I mean, there are different views about what the gods actually are. Some people believe that they are actual individuals. They exist as actual individuals with whom one can communicate. Others would say they are constructs. Others would say that they are representations or personifications of the forces in the world and in ourselves. And I think that's the view that I would take, more or less, that they're personifications of these forces that have to some extent taken on a kind of a life and dynamic of their own through many people thinking about them, focusing on them, and celebrating them in rituals. So when people ask me, well, do you really believe in the gods? Do you really believe in Odin and Thor, or Apollo, or whatever in the classical tradition? What I say is, well, I don't need to believe in them because I experience them the whole time. One of the things I say about paganism is that it's not a religion of belief; it's a religion of experience. So, for example, I don't need to believe that there's a goddess called Freya, of Freya, or Venus in the classical tradition, because I experience her all the time. She's the force of eros, of erotic love, and she's all around us all the time. So I don't need to believe in her. I experience her. So that's really my view of the gods. As some people would say, well, but why do you need to hold these rituals? You know, is that not really sort of anachronistic? And I say, well, what's the point of having a deity unless you celebrate him or her?
Right.
So
that's great.
Yeah, that's more or less my position.
Well, God forbid, but we all eventually transcend to another realm. What is your belief? And if it's too personal, you don't have to answer. But if what do you believe once we, part ways with this realm, with this earth?
Well, I have to be honest and say that basically I don't know.
That's a good answer.
I know what I would like to believe.
Yeah.
I'd like to believe that consciousness survives death, and I think that's what I tend to believe, that there's some consciousness that does survive death, and there's been a lot of research done on this. Have been all these near-death experiences that people have had, and communication with the dead, and there does seem to be quite a lot of evidence that the individual consciousness does survive death.
That's great.
So I think that's what I would like to believe.
Well, that's what we all want to believe. I remember Betty White said, a couple of years before she passed away, or somebody asked her if she was scared of, dying or moving on. She said, "Well, no, I'm actually excited because we finally know the secret." So, I think until it happens to us, then we know. But unfortunately, time is up. But I do have a last question, because there are a lot of people that may be listening today that are really kind of teetering on wanting to practice paganism and explore it more, but they don't know where to start. What would be your advice for somebody beginning in paganism? What do they start to do? Give us your words of wisdom.
Well, that's a difficult question. I would say that they should think about what form of paganism they're attracted to. Read as much as they can about the different pagan traditions, and find out which one appeals to them most, and then find some form of practice, either on their own or with some group. And so in my case, for example, I was advised by Frederick Lamont to join the Pagan Federation, through which I was able to meet kindred spirits.
Nice.
And start to celebrate with them. So I think those are the steps that I would advise anyone to take.
Being around like-minded people is always sometimes the best form of information. So, well, we really appreciate you. You've written some amazing books. The book we're really talking about today, The Call of the Old Gods, My Occult Journey on the Pagan Path. Is there any new books coming out, or is your hand getting tired?
No, I'm currently working on a new book on Prague. Actually,
Prague.
I've written a book called Occult Russia and another called Occult Germany. So now I'm writing Occult Prague.
When that comes out, please come back, because I was just there a year ago, and my first time, and I loved it. I love Prague. So
yeah, an amazing place.
It's a walking museum, pretty much. You can.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, well, Dr. Christopher, please come back again, and thank you so much for being a part of Truth Be Told once more. And
you're welcome.
And people can go to your website, Osgard,
Yes.
loveit.net, and you can go to Amazon, pick up a book. There's plenty to read there. So, but I appreciate your taking the time out.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate you, as always, every Friday here on Truth Be Told on our YouTube channel. Please like, subscribe, leave amazing comments, share with everybody to let us know or let them know about us, and subscribe to our Apple, Spotify, iHeart, all the old amazing podcasts, about 1,000 of them now. So we hope that you guys can find something you like in there. Suggest people that you like to see on Truth Be Told. Make sure you tune in on Monday for Robert Hensley, Truth Be Told, Going Wild, Rewilding into Nature, and then Bonnie Burker, Truth Be Told, Transformation, more to the metaphysical side and spiritual side of Truth Be Told. And of course, me, every Friday, been doing this almost 14 years. So I really appreciate you tuning in every Friday. So until next time, I'm Tony Sweet. Take care of yourself and each other.